Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and I have yet another wonderful guest with me today. I'm so excited he's here. Grant Dudson. He is the creative director at Chorus, but he is an exceptional artist, and I'm thrilled that you're able to join us today. So welcome.
Thank you, Kerry. It's an absolute honor and a privilege. I wouldn't generally do this for anybody at 12:30 in the morning, but for you, anything.
Thank you. Yes, appreciated a million times. And I want to start, a little bit with your journey before we get into your thoughts on art overall. I was reading a little bit more about you. You are pretty successful in terms of like the karate world. You've done graphic design, you're a musician, and now you're a creative director. Where did this kind of love for art or interest in art begin? And kind of where is the start of your journey, would you say?
I mean, I've always loved art, really, even without knowing, right? You dive into it when you're a child. I think a lot of us really kind of we'll start doodling, we'll start building, even when you get like your first Lego kit, it kind of sparks that creative side and it kind of pulls something out of you. And I think everyone's born into this world an artist to a degree. I think we're given that sense of play because it's all about exploration. It's like, if you think about it logically, if we were to design a human and it was like, right, you're going to go into that space and then it's all about exploring and you've got to be curious and all of those kind of facets of who we are as people. We're all born with it, and it's innate and it's intense when we first enter into this realm. And then somewhere along the line, society basically kind of goes, you don't want to be an artist, you want to be a doctor. You don't want to be an artist, you want to be a lawyer, or you want to be, and at best, I think for me, I ended up kind of going, well, I don't know, I'd love to be an artist. They're like, well, maybe an architect. You can do a bit of maths as well. Okay, fine. So I kind of chose architecture and then realized it was a 7-year course. And that put me off quite quickly because I've always been this guy who has, chopped and changed in terms of what I like. And I like so much. I love life. And I think being a creative as well, it's a blessing and a curse, but you can really kind of apply your creative lens to so many different mediums. And I'm very multidisciplinary. So, I've always been kind of, I love photography, I love painting, I love building things with my hands, I love, spatial design. I love so much. And suddenly you go, well, I'm kind of becoming a generalist and it's all about specializing. But then I think over especially the last 10 years, specializing and generalizing is becoming a thing. And being able to actually apply that creativity to so many different things. And I think, if you go back to when we were at school, we were studying 9 subjects, and that was fine. And some people were very good at all 9, and they would, completely blitz through their exams and they would ace everything. And I think there's no reason you can't do that to a degree as well when, you get older and you decide that you want to start to kind of enter into a particular industry. And the industry I'm in now is kind of experiential. But it kind of started off with kind of big projection mapping shows for like Ralph Lauren and we did a kind of big projection mapping show for Nokia Lumia Live launch where we projection mapped Millbank Tower. It was just, they were epic shows. I mean, huge. And it was a really interesting insight. And that was my first ticket into that industry. I was looking at all of these massive spectacles that were being created by all of these phenomenal people. The talent that was around me was effervescent, and I could start to draw and pull from all of these different people. And there were technologists involved, and then there were actual kind of purist artists involved, and then production teams were involved. So I think over the years, because I've been kind of in the same room with so many experts in different specialist fields, I've actually learned so much from all of them. And then it's the practicality of, it's all well and good. And you saying, when did it all start? And I know I'm kind of like going all over the shop, but when you're a kid, there's no implication in terms of you turning that blue sky idea into something that's actually going to work. You don't have to go, oh, I'm going to create this. And it's got, we live in our imagination when we're young. But I think it's great training for life in general anyway. Um, but when you're older, you need to understand how to kind of translate all of that blue sky thinking into something that actually works in the real world. And that's what I've honed as a skill over the last 10 years.
Yeah, there's so much that I resonate with and agree with. I think, like you said, when we're young, we're very creative. I always say that my favorite age of children is that like 8 to 10 year old, because they're their own person and kind of weird and creative and just being themselves. And then, like you said, school or society can kind of change that. But having, I was a performing artist, so dance was kind of my original medium. I think, a lot of times people think, okay, well, I have to just master that, and that's the only thing. How do I translate those artistic skills? Can I be multi-passionate, or do I need to focus on one thing? Was there like a point in your life that you realized it was okay to be multi-passionate, to be able to do a lot of art, and kind of what triggered that thought that it was okay?
I think I'll always grapple with it a little bit. There's always times when I'm like, oh my God, and I'll have an idea, but it'll be a completely different discipline, right? So, maybe I write a book or something, and I'm like, oh my God, I could be like a script writer. And the thing is as well is that when I finished, I studied graphic design at uni, and I kind of fell into that because it was something that, and this is the advice you're given, do something you can fall back on. And that's what I did. And I left that course, graduated, with a degree, and I was like, okay, cool. I want to be a singer. I want to find a band or form a band. I want to get into music. That's who I am. That's what I'm going to do. So my parents were like, what are you talking about? You 3 years, uni studying graphic design, so you can take that next step into a career, and you can, build a life for yourself, and, have kids and have suddenly your whole life is mapped out like within a heartbeat. And you're like, that's what you're supposed to do. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think there should be some sort of structure that we follow, but I also think it's important to stay creative and stay flexible. And I ended up going, right, I'm gonna get into music, and I did, and I ended up in a band for 2 years, and I lived in LA, and I lived in Italy, and I saw the world through a lens that most people don't see that world through. And it was amazing, and it really did channel my creative side and my performance side. So it allowed me to write music. I was doing crazy things, like 1 minute, I lived with a pimp for like 2 months in LA. Next minute, I'm like on the Greyhound bus from LA to New York. I mean, I was 22 years old. I had no idea what the hell was going on. The guy I was with was like, you don't follow me. It's all good. I'll look after you. And he did. But it meant I went to some strange places, to be honest, and definitely out of my comfort zone. But I think with all of that, it inspires you, and it also helps kind of formulate the character you become. And I think we all have to be open to that. The more experiences you have and the more diversity you have, especially when you're young, when you can get away with it, the more well-rounded you become as a person. I think I know myself better now than I've ever known myself. And I still, have a lot to learn about what I'm capable of. And sometimes I surprise myself, and sometimes it's a good surprise, and other times it's not so good. But I think, again, don't be so precious on being perfect and, working out your life. Like, you don't have to. I think life is about enjoying it. I think if you enjoy every day, everything else just kind of, it just takes care of itself, really.
Well, it sounds like, yeah, you kind of had this kind of inside of you to always kind of try a variety of things. Did you ever feel like you tried something that was creative that you thought might not work, and you felt maybe stressed or uncertain about it, or, not sure you should take that step? Or were you always like, I'm just going to try it and see what happens?
I've always tried. I've done a lot of trying, a lot of failing. I think one of my issues when I was young was that I was very impatient. I wanted everything, and I wanted it now. I've always had big ideas. I've always aligned with, I'd look at a brand and I go, right, that's where that brand will be in the next 5 years. And generally I'm right. But it's one thing kind of envisioning, where something will be in a few years' time. It's another thing actually going, well, how do I become an integral part of actually shaping that industry, right? That's the difficult bit, and ultimately it's about knowing the right people, so you can get in that room with the decision makers and you can go, actually, I know how this is actually going to turn out. And that's why I've started doing what I'm doing on LinkedIn, because that gives me a voice to be able to actually go, look guys, look at this trend, look what's happening in the kind of art installation world, look what's happening in the experiential economy, looks and so effectively, LinkedIn is really interesting now because it's just giving me, and it's a commitment as well. Like sometimes I just don't, I basically said 5 days a week I'm going to post something, and sometimes I'll get to like I'll be working till midnight, and then I go, oh my god, I've got to write a post for tomorrow morning, and you have to post it between like 8 and 9, because that's when you get the traction. But for the last 3-4 months, I have not missed one day. I've posted 5 days a week without fail. And I think that's the other thing, is going just, and it's a really good bit of advice actually. And someone said this to me on a plane, because that's the other thing, is like, keep yourself open, converse with everyone, learn every day, compliment as many people as you can, pull out the positivity of every environment and situation you're in. And so I try and do that, and I try and learn from my situation and from people I meet. And a guy was next to me on the plane, and he goes, just turn up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you fail, just turn up. That's the most important thing. And it sounds easy, but most people don't. Most people talk about it, but they never step in. They never open the door and at least walk through. You might not, you might not be there for long, but just walk through the door and see what happens. And I've done that a lot in my life, I have to say. And actually, it's given me a life rich with experiences and meeting so many amazing people. I've had, I did dinner with Buzz Aldrin and Richard Branson's mum. Like, how random and weird is that? Like, and me and my wife, basically, we met Richard Branson's mum at Chesterton's Polo, and like some sort of, like, it was like the VIP tent. I've no idea how I ended up in there, to be honest. I think I probably gate crashed, but basically I was basically in the same kind of domain, and the long and short of it is that we started talking to her. Then there was a mutual friend that her and my wife knew, and then they were like, oh, shall we do dinner tomorrow? And then they basically said, let's do dinner the next day. And then this mutual friend said, can I bring a friend? And we're like, yeah, more the merrier. And he's like, oh, I'm going to bring my friend's Buzz Aldrin. And what, like the Buzz Aldrin? Yeah, the Buzz Aldrin. All right, no problem. You can definitely bring him. That's cool. And then he brought his nephew, and then his manager was there. So suddenly it's like, I went, and we weren't even going to go to this Chesterton's Polo thing, right? I don't even really care about polo, if I'm brutally honest. I think it's quite cool to go and drink some champagne and do some pims and be all a bit flashy. But, like, it's more for the social, from my perspective. But yeah, we turned up, and the next day I'm like sat with some dude that's been on the moon, and I'm just like, this is life.
Well, I love that. I mean, I think, again, you talking about just staying open and trying things. And you were talking about LinkedIn, which is how we connected. You post some of your work and some of other people's work, which is also a huge part of it, showcasing, like, it's not just me doing it. Here's this group of people that are creative, and it's beautiful. And it's very eye-catching, I think, compared to some of the posts you see. And it falls under experiential art. Can you talk about what that means for people that don't understand that, and kind of how that's become a thing over the years?
Yeah, experiential art for me, and obviously people have their own definitions, but from my perspective, and I've been doing now brand experience work for like over 10 years. And experiential art is effectively, it has experience at the heart of it. It's not just about going into a gallery and looking at a painting or looking at a sculpture and then reading about the sculpture. You don't get the sculpture, you read about, okay, now I understand. Like, experiential art, it's almost you walking in, and you're part of that art piece. There's also kind of experiential art, and I'm working on a lot of concepts at the moment that I'm looking to kind of bring to life, and it actually puts the audience in the driving seat of the experience, so they become the artists, if you will. What you're doing as the artist is you're playing a conceptual role, and you create a stage that they can enter into. You give them the tools to be able to express themselves. And however they express themselves ends up being the finished art piece. So I've got one installation called One Hit Wonder. And it was kind of born out of the pandemic and all of the kind of difficulties that everyone's been going through, and how everyone's faced really trying times mentally as
Yep.
well. It's just been, it doesn't matter who you are, it's been really tough on so many people. And obviously my industry was decimated, like everything just disappeared overnight. And I was like, well, how can I do something that actually gets people kind of, it kickstarts their appreciation for life again. It kind of pulls out that kind of that positive outlook. And I think it's so crucial to be able to create experiences and installations that actually draw upon that side of that kind of that human nature. And so One Hit Wonder was about basically having a huge kind of 5 meter by 5 meter cube you would walk in by yourself. You would be given a balloon that was filled with acrylic paint of a color of your choice. And then effectively you'd walk into that room by yourself, and you would think of a positive affirmation, a little bit like a kind of wishing well. And then whatever that positive affirmation was, if it's a dream, if it's just something that you want to reinforce positively that kind of gives you a sense of empowerment, you then just launch that balloon at the wall. It explodes. You make your mark. That's the physical mark that you've made that represents that nugget of positivity that's come from a deeper part of who you are. And then you leave. You're done. And then the next person walks in, and then you do exactly the same thing. And you have 100 people per day over 30 days. So it spanned across that month. And effectively, what you're doing is you're building up, and because you're using acrylic paint as well, it's very thick, viscous. It doesn't congeal and become more brown and runny, and it actually looks stunning. And there's a topography to it as well. There's texture. And effectively, it layers up over the course of this 30 days and becomes this beautiful art piece, like a kind of almost walk-in 3D Jackson Pollock painting. So not only are the people going in and they're expressing themselves positively, at the end of it, you actually have this beautiful art piece that's been created by the people for the people. And that, for me, typifies what experiential art is. It's giving people the opportunity to express themselves and be part of this art experience instead of being dictated to. So many art installations for me are really kind of, don't get me wrong, there's some amazing stuff out there, but I think a lot of it is very dictatorial. It's like, you should appreciate this because it's really cool and it costs 10 million pounds. So it's really, that's what you need to pay attention to. Well, actually, how about you really kind of enhance the engagement between the audience and the art itself, get them involved. Yayoi Kusama's done it before as well with the Obliteration Room. It's not like artists don't approach art in this way. I just feel that there's an opportunity to leverage.
Yes, I love that. I don't know if they have it in the UK, but here in the US, they've done the Color Factory was one they did. And they have kind of these different, I guess they call them pop-up museums, where you can experience these different things. And there's different artists that do different rooms. And there's kind of been this trend. And it's such a incredible experience. It makes you think differently, it makes you connect differently. So I love what you're saying. You do a lot of this with brands. And I'm curious, what would you say is the value to a business or a brand when they're thinking about creating an experience? And especially even in today's day and age where, there's obviously limitations with the pandemic. Just curious your thoughts overall on that.
I mean, the thing is, like, brands, obviously there's a lot of brands now that are a little bit jaded with experience based on what's happened over the last 18 months, which, is understandable. But brands also need to take a very confident and bold position because it's going to come back. Are you going to be a brand that champions it, that leads the way, that shows to everybody that in the face of this adversity, you can actually succeed and get back on track and, kind of stride forth with a spring in your step? Can you be one of those brands, or do you just want to wait until your competition proves that it's okay again? But the thing is, we never know if it is or it isn't anyway. We could bounce back next year. we're like, oh my God, experiences are back. Suddenly some other COVID-23 comes in and knocks everything out. And then we're back to square one. Life can't go on like that. You just need to go for it. And you need to look at how important creating the right experiences are. And I think if you look at the retail space, I do a lot on the whole retail landscape, because I just think it's ripe for revolution. I think if you look at all of these shops and they can, oh, retail's dead. It doesn't have to be dead. It really doesn't. But brands need to take a complete shift approach to the way that they address those spaces. It's about spatial design. If we're talking about experiential economy, if we're talking about creating these amazing experiences, each and every single brand has a beautiful heritage and a story. Why can't you actually manifest that through experience? Why can't you kind of create these amazing metaphorical worlds that actually align with the sentiment of the brand, or tell you a bit more about a product? Like, I was assigned to a big Ford press launch outside of Madrid for that very reason. And Ford came to me and they were like, can we create something really engaging in terms of a presentation platform that's going to get everyone really excited about the different features of the car? And just to give you a little bit of an insight into what I mean, one of the big parts of obviously buying a car is the materials you get inside the car. The calf leather seating or the stitching or whatever it is. It's the craftsmanship, and it's the layering, and it's the tactility of what happens within that car. So how do I take something like that, and instead of just going, right, guys, I'm going to tell you about the interior of the car, here's a few pieces of material, give it a nice little stroke. We're like, well, that's just boring. Stop doing that. Like, let's stop pretending that works, because it doesn't. No one cares. They're feeling this, and all they're doing is thinking about the champagne they'll have in about an hour's time when all of this is done. But if you reframe that, and we created a pitch black maze, so it's a labyrinth you would walk into, you can't see a thing, but you were forced to feel and navigate your way through. And because you're forced to feel, suddenly your sense of touch is honed. And as a result of that, we can really play with that, right? So then we layered up all of the walls with different materials, going from natural materials to man-made, and then to the materials you get within the car. So you would start with like tree bark. You'd have grass on the walls. Then we'd go to cork. We'd get bubble wrap, sticky tape. I had a collage of rubber gloves we blew up, sprayed with water to freak people out. And everyone was just, people going, oh my God, oh my God, what is this? But what they're doing is they're engaging through their sense of touch in a way they've never done before. And also, as soon as it becomes pitch black, there's a sense of fear. Mm-hmm. But if you can actually counteract that, and you can go, it's actually a safe space, and you can also get in tune with a particular sense and really enhance that, suddenly that becomes a really amazing mode of education. And by the time they got to the calf leather seating and the different kind of stitching and all of that kind of stuff, they were so in tune with what was going on the inside of that car and the way everything felt, that when they left and then there was a presentation by the interior designer of the car, everyone was so engrossed in what she had to say. They were like, tell me more, because I get it now. I'm really under the skin of this conversation. That's what you need. That's why brands need to invest in experience.
I love that. And I love the way you just told that story too. And like you said, it's just more engaging and more aware. And you had said something, there was another podcast you did, and you kind of talked about the importance of empathy and really understanding the other person. Where does empathy fit in terms of art, would you say?
Oh my God, I think empathy is everything in so many mediums as well. And it's such a powerful tool. And I think if it was a subject at school, I think we would actually see a lot of benefits from that. I think it's really kind of understanding, how to connect with your audience on a visceral level. Obviously there's so much marketing jargon that goes on in my world, and you have to jump through so many hoops, and it's, yeah, but is it really saying this or is it really saying that? And there are so many people that really demand this kind of literal explanation of everything that you do creatively. And sometimes that, unfortunately, that can strip the kind of intensity of your creative concept, to its bare bones, and suddenly it's not as creative as it was originally. And I think sometimes things don't have to be explained. Like sometimes it's just about this emotive connection. If you look at a lot of the Janet Eckelman work that was done, and she's collaborated with Google and also Mercedes, and she does these beautiful ethereal, I don't know if you know, but they're these beautiful ethereal installations, up in the sky, like by night, and she projection maps them, and they're just illuminated in such a wonderful and complex way, but they're otherworldly. And if you see it in real life, it's stunning. If you see it even just as a video and captured as a piece of content, it's still absolutely beautiful. Nobody sometimes knows whether it's a collaboration with Mercedes and this, that, and the other, but it's the fact that some brands are that confident. They go, we want to give back. We want to give back to the place that has hosted us for so many years, right? It's also about brands taking that position of being bold, of being confident, of being benevolent, and absolutely going, how do we make people feel again? And how do you, without going, it's us, we're Mercedes, we did this, where's the Mercedes logo? Like, you don't always need that. Like, people will find out eventually. Like, if there's an art installation, up in the sky, like, you don't know immediately what artist has created that. No, the artist's name isn't scrolled over every installation you see. Most installations you look at, you don't know who the hell the artist is, but eventually you do, right? Because you go, wow, that's really cool, I want to find out more. People want to find out more. Use that curiosity play in order to really connect with your audience. I think there's something really exciting about that. So, from my perspective, understand your audience. That's where empathy plays its role. And I think that can be done through the conduit of art.
Yeah, I agree. I've always talked about brand being a feeling, and people want to feel something, especially in this last couple years or so. Again, love the way that you say that. If people want to connect with you, or they want to kind of follow some of the work that you do, whether it's on LinkedIn or elsewhere, where is the best place for people to do that?
LinkedIn is the best place to kind of follow my thought leadership pieces, and kind of where my head's at in terms of where experiential design is, and retail, and what retail needs to do to basically take it itself to another level. And yeah, I mean, I don't post on Mondays and Tuesdays anymore, so because they're terrible days and you don't get any traction whatsoever. I've been spending so long on these bloody posts, and I'll go, oh, this is a really good post, and I'll post it Monday morning and it gets like no traction, and I'm like, oh my god, and it is infuriating, because 1 minute I get like 60,000 views and the next minute I'm getting 5. And I'm like, I even complained to LinkedIn going, guys, what the hell is going on? Like, put your algorithm out. This is horrific. So now I've worked out, and this is a little tip to anybody else, is that if you're going to start doing thought leadership pieces, post really rich kind of visual content, and then obviously a considered thought leadership piece around that, but effectively post first thing in the morning, say between 8 and 9. I think 2:00 in the afternoon sometimes works as well, but kind of Wednesday to Sunday, they're the times to post. Monday to Tuesday, they just don't bother.
I love that little tidbit. Like I said, that's how I connected with you on LinkedIn, and the images stand out. So that for me was just, they're gorgeous and interesting. And then obviously you write, more information about them and what they're doing, which is wonderful. The last question I like to ask all of my guests, Grant, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day?
Oh man, I mean, you've completely put me on the spot. I think you've just gotta. I don't like to quote other people's quotes. I mean, there's that whole kind of be the change you wish to see. But I think my mantra is, if I could just give a slice of happiness to everybody I meet, then you'll get the value from life that you deserve. Like I'll always look for, I make an absolute habit out of meeting strangers and finding something about that person. So it's not, kind of a compliment for compliment's sake. It's a genuine compliment. I find something I really appreciate about them, and I'll tell them. And that's for me. That's how I live my life. Like I will always go, oh my God, like if she's got nice earrings, or if they've got a nice demeanor about them. Like I remember compliments that were paid to me when I was like 18 years old. I remember compliments about some shoes I wore when I was like 23 years old on, go on the tube platform in London. Like it's insane how powerful a genuine compliment can be, and how much it embeds this sense of rich vibrance within you, especially coming from someone you don't know. And if people could just take that approach to life, there are so many nonsensical kind of things that we have to endure when we look at the news and this, that, and the other, that wouldn't be there anymore, because we're just feeding this positivity to one another. That's where the empathy comes from. It doesn't cost a thing to be nice to someone. It doesn't cost a thing to say thank you. It doesn't cost a thing just to be conscious.
Yes.
If someone's walking through a door, open the door for them. If someone smiles at you, smile back. If someone says thank you, say no problem. Anytime, it's a pleasure. Like this is what I struggle with in terms of, some sort of because I have interactions, and I do, I give out so much, and sometimes if I don't get it back, and that's my problem, and that's what I'm working on. But like if I, I'll say, thanks for opening the door, or hi, how you doing, or good morning, or whatever it is, and not in an annoying way, like, oh, good morning. Like, it's like I'm like, oh, good morning, and sometimes I don't get anything back, and I'm like, okay.
Yes.
And I'm like, whew. And I want to go for them. I'm like, what's your problem? I say good morning. You should say good morning back. And but you can't do that, because then you become the maniac, and everyone goes, look at that guy. So yeah, it's but I think that's what I just want to give out love, and I want to give out positivity. And then, if I've made one person, kind of feel better about themselves every day, then my job's done.
Yes, I cannot agree more. We also have Kenneth Scott watching. He said, very true. Loves what you're saying. I agree. And I'm sitting here nodding my head. So I am so glad that we were able to connect and have you on today. I thank you so much, Grant. And if you are watching and listening, definitely check out his work on LinkedIn. And you can listen and follow the podcast at Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. Thank you so much, Grant.
Kerry, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you.